Can you sue your laser eye surgeon? This is a question I get asked by a lot of people when they find out that my vision was destroyed from laser eye surgery. It's really not a simple yes or no question. There's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration. Some of these things include what your complications are, if you were considered a suitable candidate for the procedure or not. Although, you know that I don't think anybody is a suitable candidate, but there's certainly some people who are at higher risk for complications than others. The type of procedure you had, how long ago you had the procedure, the specific laws regarding medical malpractice in your area, and a bunch of other things that need to be considered. Medical malpractice cases in general are pretty tough cases to file and win. Some are a lot easier to file than others. If there was a blatant negligence, then it should be pretty straightforward, open and shut case. But a lot of medical malpractice cases are not very straightforward, and specifically with laser eye surgery, there can be a lot of room for interpretation. So these can be tougher cases to pursue. I have a case that's still pending right now, and I'm not going to go into the details about it, but I do have a lot of experience with this topic just through having to file my own case and go through a lot of the processes involved with it. The first thing that I would take into account when deciding if you are able to file a lawsuit against your laser eye surgeon or not is looking into the statute of limitations for your area. The statute of limitations is basically the time span that you are allowed to file a case against your surgeon for medical malpractice. This time frame is going to depend on the laws in your region. I live in the United States, and I know the laws are different from state to state, and I'm not sure about other countries, how the laws are, so that is something you'd have to find out on your own. But you have to make sure you're within that statute of limitations, because if you try to file the case outside of it, then you're no longer eligible to actually file a medical malpractice case. And the statute of limitations usually starts running from the date you have the procedure, but in some areas, such as where I live, that can actually be extended to when you basically should have reasonably known you were having issues from the surgery. And for me, that wasn't until about a year out from the surgery that I even started really to develop any type of vision issues. So for me, that's basically around when the statute of limitations would start. So assuming you're within the statute of limitations, basically the next step would try to be to find a lawyer who is going to be willing to work with you. And many lawyers aren't really jumping at the chance to work on a medical malpractice case because they generally are tougher cases and can be a little bit tricky. And a lot of lawyers just want easier cases that are just way more straightforward, open and close. So it can be a little tricky trying to find a lawyer, especially for this type of malpractice, again, which can be very open to interpretation if it's something regarding your vision, for instance, because other people obviously cannot see what you're saying. So it can make the case a little bit trickier, but I'm sure that there's always lawyers that are willing to work with somebody on this type of case, assuming they believe you actually have a case to even begin with. Next, you'll probably need to find an expert witness who's willing to testify on your behalf. And this is usually another ophthalmologist. And from my experience, it won't be easy finding one because most of them just don't want to get involved. They basically get involved is kind of admitting that there are inherent dangers and risks with these surgeries. And obviously, anybody with any common sense knows there's a lot of dangers and risks, but obviously ophthalmologists don't really want to admit it because they want to be able to perform as many surgeries as possible, and they try to market it as something completely safe, routine, with very minimal, if any, risks. And that's how most of these ophthalmologists portray these surgeries, which is completely deceitful. Also, a lot of them don't want the backlash from their community and other ophthalmologists. These sickos like to stick together and will gladly do anything to defend and protect their lucrative business of slicing open and butchering people's eyeballs. So it's going to be tough to find one. And if you're lucky enough to find one that will testify for you, there's still going to be, a lot of other hurdles, but that tends to be the toughest one, at least in trying to get the case off the ground. So when it comes to compensation, there are few components that will make up the potential monetary amount you could be rewarded. I'm not really going to try to go into specific details on exact figures of what you can get, but I'll give an example. So there is ophthalmologist who I talked to before who quite some years ago worked with a dentist out in Canada. He was the expert witness for his dentist who had, I believe, LASIK, who's basically LASIK destroyed his vision and he wasn't able to work anymore. And he got rewarded somewhere around $5 million for, pain and suffering, lost income from not being able to work and all that stuff. So there are other multi-million-dollar payouts I've heard of. So I believe anything, over $1 million is a little bit rarer to get, but there certainly have been cases of people winning, multi-million-dollar cases, settlements. So it's certainly possible. So the first component of the compensation is usually the pain and suffering piece, which in my opinion is worth more than anything because your life, lots of lives are basically destroyed. And I tell people all the time, there's no amount of money you could give me that would make me want to go through with this procedure and have all these vision issues. I don't care if it's $1 billion. I would gladly take having perfect normal vision again over any amount of money. But since obviously I can't get normal vision again, or most likely will never happen, or even get close to what I had, being compensated, I guess, is the next best thing. And again, regarding figures, that's going to depend on a lot of different things. But I believe this piece alone is usually worth the most out of anything. The next component is the earnings that you had lost either in the past or in the future. So future earnings from not being able to work and past earnings from not having been able to work. So in my case, there's a lot of jobs I cannot do now because of my vision issues. So that's going to affect my earnings. And also I wasn't able to work for a while after having the surgery because I was going around, going to all these different ophthalmologists, eye specialists, trying to find any relief for some of these vision issues I was having. So I was taking up a lot of my time, and also I was just so devastated, so depressed, just in such a bad mental and emotional state because of the surgery that I couldn't work for a while. I mean, I could barely get out of bed. It's very, very, very difficult dealing with this stuff after having mostly your whole life having normal vision and having to deal with all this stuff is very difficult. So surgery's definitely affected my earnings for sure. So that's another thing that needs to be taken into consideration. And I think the last big piece is the basically expenses that you've had to incur because of the surgery. I won't go into details of what makes up all the expenses I've had because I actually did a short video explaining this, and I'll actually put a little link to it at the end of this video if you want to watch it. But I've spent roughly over $100,000 in expenses over the last 5 or 6 years because of the surgery. So it would be nice to get back a little bit of the money I've had to spend due to the surgery. And there's probably some other components to compensation, but I just can't really think of them right now. So my advice to anyone who's dealing with any complications from refractive eye surgery is to sooner rather than later seek legal advice. And you want to do that sooner, again, because of the statute of limitations. The clock starts running pretty much after you have the surgery. And you may not be able to file a medical malpractice case, but it's at least worth looking into because it's not going to do any harm to look into it. The thing is, these ophthalmologists need to be held responsible for their actions, for the pain and suffering they're causing. So for me, this isn't just about trying to reclaim some of the money I've lost or get some of the money that I won't be able to ever have because I'm not able to do certain jobs and limits, again, my ability to work, all that stuff. It's not just about that. It's about trying to hold these people accountable, letting them know that you cannot knowingly ruin someone's life and then think there are no consequences to that. Just knowingly ruin someone's life for money and then think you can't be held accountable. These people need to be held accountable. That is the only way they're ever going to stop or ever think twice about what they're doing, because they have no morals. They don't care about other people's well-being. So try to hit them where it hurts. And if all they care about is money, then unfortunately you're going to have to try and take that money because nothing else seems to bother them. They don't care about, these stories about people taking their own lives or whatever. They just don't give a shit. So you got to have them in the bank account, I guess, if that's going to deter them or at least make them think twice about doing what they're doing. So I hope in the end that justice will prevail for everybody who's been hurt by these surgeries. And yeah, that's all I got for today. Again, there's a link in the corner for a video regarding my expenses if you want to get a little bit more detail on what I've had to spend over the years. Until next time, stay strong, warriors.